Okay, we're going to talk today about a new year and a new you. And I think this is going to be a lot of fun because I think a lot of us wonder, how do we take this new year and do something with it? How do we create something that's amazing? How do we do that? And how do we create this new year that we want? How do we create the new you that we want? And how do we have that new perspective to really see what we want in our life? And I think that this is very important right now more than ever. And I don't agree with just a new year and that's when we should start things. But I think it's a good benchmark to begin to do things at the time now, since it's a benchmark of time. And it seems like it's easier for us to do things when there's this benchmark, right? When there's this timing. And so let's focus on this on tonight's talk. It'll be a live talk today. Obviously, none of this is really scripted. So it's just kind of some ideas and some thoughts that I've had. Actually, 8 different ways that we can make this year the best year we've ever had. And so these are 8 ideas that I've had of ways that we can make this year better, things that we can do beginning right now. So it's not like, oh, we got to plan all this, we got to wait, we got to, we got to do all this. No, we can actually begin to put these things into practice today. And I think this is going to be helpful for anybody that's watching it, watching the feed live, or watching later on. This will be really helpful and timely. So we hear about goal setting all the time. We hear people talking about goal setting, and that's great. But what do we really do? How do we really do it? We hear about the power of our thoughts and how we need to really focus on our thoughts and really look at our thoughts to make sure that our minds are in the right place, that we're thinking logically, we're thinking correctly, that we're thinking more positively. And the power of positive thought is good, but how do we do it? What about the concept of being mindful? We hear about mindfulness a lot. We hear about people talking about all this stuff, this chatter all the time, how we should be mindful and what that means. And that's great. But how do we implement that today? How do we implement that through this year and each and every day? And so first off, I want us to look at this year just as the one day. So I don't want us to think about, oh my God, I have 363 days or whatever left, or whatever the number is when you're watching this video. But it's really about, how do we start right now and what can we do today? So if somebody was trying to, let's say, quit smoking, I would not sit there and say, okay, we're going to focus on quitting for an entire year. I would think about focusing on quitting for this one day. And then I would think about focusing on continuing to stay away from cigarettes that night. And then the next morning, I would think about how great it would be when I'm not smoking for 2 days. So I want us to really adapt this type of thought process, because I think if we try to adapt this whole year-long thought process, we're going to lose sight of the power that we have. We're also going to lose sight of how to really get to where we want to go. So let's begin the discussion today, because I think we need to talk about motivation. And I think motivation is one of the toughest things to come by nowadays. I think getting motivated is really, really challenging and really hard. And so how do we get motivated? How do we stay motivated? And how do we stay consistent? And I think one of the best things that we can do right now is to really look at it as the beginning of this year. Great. We have this benchmark. Okay, this is time is of the essence. We're beginning this year. That's great. Now, what do I want to stay motivated about? What is really important to me? Because I think that we get really bogged down in the goals. What do we want to achieve? And the goals are very important, but we need to be specific in our goals. The more specific we can be, the better. Okay, so first off, if you have some goals that you want to achieve today, tomorrow, but at some point this year, I want you to write these down somewhere. If you can right now, I mean, as we're walking through this discussion, it's great, because I feel that when someone else is working on something, it's a lot easier for us to be working on something too, because somebody else is also working on it. So it's kind of the same thing as if you're listening right now and you really want to take charge. Get out a notebook, get out something that you're going to keep around, not something you're going to throw away. Try to find something better than the receipt from dinner last night. Let's find something that we can actually write it down on. And if it's the receipt and you want to transfer it to something else, that's great. But right now, let's try to find something we can write it on and really focus on. So let's begin on that goal setting conversation, because in order to really get the motivation factor, we have to be understanding our goals. And in order to understand our goals, we have to understand the intricacies of those goals and what that means and how important that is to have those goals set and figured out. So we want to really understand that. We want to see that for what that is. And we want to understand the goals that we actually want to achieve, because many of us might have things that we want to achieve, but we need to put it in the order of importance. So that's really, really important. What is it that I really want to achieve? What is it something that I really want to do more than anything? And we need to think about this because sometimes we can have a million goals, but having a million goals is probably one of the most challenging and tough situations because we can't focus on all that. And so I want us to begin because we can always add goals. We can always add things that we want, but we really want to keep this list small. And because I think the best thing to do is to put out a list of maybe 5 goals that we have and really understand what those goals are and then work really hard to attain those goals instead of having all this stuff out there and then feeling overwhelmed and depressed that we haven't achieved what we want to achieve. Because that's one of the biggest things that I find is such a pain in the ass when it comes to motivation is that we have all these goals in mind. We have all these things, but we don't have the step-by-step process of how to get there. And we have these desires and wants in our life, but we don't really know what we need to do to get there. So there's all these different little hurdles that we have to jump through. And we have to figure out how we jump through that hurdle. How do we get to that next level? What do we need to do? So getting out that journal right now would be helpful. And I think one of the best things you can do is, what is that thing that I want to achieve? What is that thing? Okay. And so, for example, for me, I can talk about my own self here. I can't talk about clients at all, but I can talk about something I'm working on in my life just to give you a good example of how this kind of applies into your life. So I'm in the process of writing my 3rd book, and I already have it outlined and I have it ready and I have all that stuff going, but now we're finishing the actual write out. We've already done an entire video production of it. We already have an entire master class that we've been sitting on for a long time, but I haven't had the time to actually sit down and write the book in its totality. And so that is what we're working on right now. And that can be really challenging and really hard because it's a large project. And for many of you, as with me, you're working a job, you have your family dynamic, you have your responsibility, you have to take care of these other responsibilities, your children, whatever that looks like, your elderly parents, whatever that looks like. And on top of that, you have this on top of that. So how do we do this? What do we need to actually do to get that? And so right now, I'm actually taking it, piecemealing it, chapter by chapter. And when I get at least a couple of chapters done, maybe one a week, I feel really good about that. Because remember, it's not a race. It's really not a race. It's actually just the idea of getting it done. And so I want y'all to look at that because I think like our whole life we've been sold this bill of goods that you got to get it done now. You got to hurry up. You got to get it done. And I agree with you. It's great when we get things done fast and speedy, and that's amazing. But sometimes that's just not possible. But what we need to do is figure out how to actually get it done, how to actually start it, and then how to finish it. Because the one thing that we don't want to have in our life is regret. And many of us have had things that we really want to do, things that we really need to do in our life, and we have felt that regret. We have been bombarded by that regret because we're upset about the things that we haven't achieved. We're upset about the things that we haven't created. And so I'm trying to bypass that because I know we all have those things that we wanted to do. And the more things that we have that we don't do, that we want to do, gets in the way of our motivation. It also gets in the way of our ability to feel good about what we can come to the table with, right? So we don't feel good about, we feel we underestimate ourselves or we think poorly of ourselves because we haven't been able to do everything that we want to do. So I want you to really think about specific goal setting and what those specific pieces of each goal looks like. And some goals are going to be obviously less intense than other goals. And I find that it depends on the kind of person you are because some people will say, no, the hardest thing, you got to jump in on that first and then do the rest later. I don't always know about that because that can work sometimes or it can literally stop somebody in their tracks. So I'm thinking you really need to estimate because this is not a one size fits all. I am not proclaiming that everything I say is directly applicable to everything about you. But what I am trying to do is give multiple aspects and perspectives to how to really achieve. And so what my consideration is, if you are one of those people that you really do want to go after the gusto and you want to go after that big thing and you want to do it now and you have that feeling and that fire and that drive in you right now, then that's something that you want to do. Then that might be the direction you take. For example, if you were quitting smoking, you would be the person that probably doesn't need the pack of cigarette around at all. You can go cold and it'll be done, right? That's great. You might be the person that can take on the huge project and not need these smaller projects to begin with to motivate and to feel better and to really gain that momentum. Now, on the other side, many of us are in the box where we do want momentum building exercises. We want to feel good. And so there are some things that are maybe they're not lesser than goals, but they're smaller goals or not as hard to attain. And those goals might need to come first. those goals might need to come first because that can sustain us and make us feel good as we're doing those goals. We're seeing change, we're seeing ourselves make those changes, and we're seeing these things come to light, which makes us feel even better and know that we can keep building and building on that motivation and building on that desire and that dedication and that perseverance to continue on. And so really you need to think about where you are, and only you know that answer. I mean, if I was working with you, I could totally tell you exactly what I think and give you, the background on why I feel that way. And, after working with you for so long and understand exactly that balance. But if I haven't worked with you, that's something that you need to take on and say, okay, what really applies to me? And this is really getting to learn about you. Because remember, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, many of us know way more about other people than we know about ourselves. We know way more about other people than we know about ourselves because we put more time and effort to knowing about them. We put more time and effort into watching them when we don't know that much about what makes us tick. So I want you to think about that by writing down these goals, like the things that you might say even in your head. Oh, I don't know if that's important, or, oh, that's not really a big goal, or, I really need to put this first, or this is really going to open up your mind to what really is important to you, but also some of the ways that we have been holding ourselves back. Okay, because this might actually open up your mind to some ways that you've been self-sabotaging yourself in the past as well, because I know that some of those goals are very important to you. And I know that some of these goals have been goals that you have actually been wanting to deal with for quite some time. And these are the goals that have to eventually get taken care of. And that is what is so important. These goals have to eventually get taken care of so that we can actually understand and see ourselves in the light that we want to see ourselves in. And so one of the things that I really want you to think about is, I know that many of you do things for everybody. And you go out of your way and you do things for everybody, and you're outgoing and you're loving and caring and you're taking care of other people's problems. And that's great. And I respect that. And that's something that's so important. That's what makes you who you are. However, I need you to begin to also look at you. It's time for you to also do what you need to do for you, because no one else is going to do it for us. And the thing is, if we don't, and we're too busy taking care of everybody else, which is good, but if we're too busy taking care of everybody else and we're not eventually taking care of what we want to take care of, it's going to make us feel sad. It's going to make us feel upset. We're going to be judging ourselves negatively. And we're too good of people to be judging ourselves negatively. We can bring a lot to the table, but we have to realize that we have to also do what's necessary for us. And that's what I want you to think about in today's show, because this is so important. And the reason why I wanted to go live instead of just doing this on the radio and just having this as a radio show is because I think it needs to be heard by you. It needs to be seen, and we need to talk about it. We don't have a lot of really great graphics in here to make everything really interesting. And I don't have any sort of cartoon in the background, which maybe we can get that if y'all want it. But I'm just thinking, let's just go with this right now and talk about this year in review and talk about what we can get done so that we can really think about it. So if you're working out right now, this might be great just to put your headphones on. You don't even have to look at me. You can just listen to some of the stuff I'm talking about. If you're journaling, you don't have to look at me at all. But I think this will be helpful in just kind of writing down some thoughts and getting some ideas. So I just want to be the voice of motivation and action for you to have this great year. And this is not the only show that we're going to be doing this on. We're going to be talking about more about this in the future, but I wanted to kick this off. Okay, so thinking about those goal setting, and look at the different subject matters that they're in. Is there goals that you have in work? Is there goals that you have in your personal life? Are there goals that you have for a family, in the family? Do you have a goal of writing a book? Whatever it is, what are these goals? Do you want to go back to school? What are these things that you want to achieve? Do you want to make your marriage more successful? Do you want to have a child? What are the things that you want? And I want you to start writing these things out, because it's not just in one area of your life. It's not just career, right? It's not just family. These are goals that we have. If you want to get a house, if you want to eventually be in a house, like, I want to get out of an apartment, I want to be in a house, I want to do this. What are the steps that we need to take to get there? And how important is this to you? Because we need to rate these goals to make them important. And we need to rate these goals so that we know exactly what's important and what we want to achieve. And goal setting is great, but goal setting is only as great as us doing things. And goal setting is only as good as attainable as we can. So there's got to be some goals that might be a little harder to attain. And there needs to be some goals that are actually more easier to attain, because we have to get some successes as well. Okay. We all deserve to have success and we all need to feel successes. And so that's very important that we want to have various different goals at various different levels about various different things in our life. And so that's going to be helpful. So thinking about that. Okay, so let's get past the goals for a second because some people can just drone on and on about goals, about this year and goals, and that's great. And they are very important. But what about being mindful? And I know that many of you hear that. We talk about mindfulness all the time. I talk about mindfulness sometimes till I'm blue in the face. And I mean, and I get that, and I'm seeing some amazing comments on here too. It's great. I want to be a kinder person is one goal that I have, and I love that comment. It's perfect, great comment. That's something that I'm actually going to be bringing up here in just a little bit. So we'll go back to that stuff because that's definitely a great goal and something to because that really not only is that benefiting you, but it's benefiting everybody around you. And remember, we're the first ones to hear what comes out of our mouth. Okay. And so sometimes it can be challenging to remember that we are the first ones to deal with the actions and attitudes that we have. Okay. So we definitely want to remember that. So the mindfulness in the moment. Now, the reason why it's important to be mindful is we can be in the right place at the right time. And I had a client meeting right before that's why I was running a little bit late. Because the session had started a little late and then I went over a little bit and then we had to get set up and all that great stuff. But it's one thing to be in the right place at the right time. And I've started realizing something. For the most part, if we're doing what's right by us, if we're doing what's right by us and by others, we're usually in the right place at the right time. Now, sometimes we can totally be out of sync. And that can be when we're not doing what we need to be doing. That can be when we're not taking care of our responsibilities. That could be when we're kind of off target, when we're not feeling ourselves. There's times where we might be out of the loop. However, for the most part, if we're living our life with the right intentions and we are doing what we need to do for ourselves and others, we're normally in the right place at the right time, even sometimes when it doesn't feel that way. But what I've realized is that in order to know that you're in the right place at the right time, you actually have to be mindful in the moment to know that. Because you could be in the perfect place at the perfect time, but not even have an idea of that and not be able to implicate that or use that to any sort of advantage. As far as realizing not only the interesting part of that, how cool that is, but then the impact that has in your life and to see what's going on. And if you're not mindful, like when people say, oh, you'll meet that person at the right time, whatever, if that's the case, that's great. But if you're not mindful enough to realize that there's a potential of that in that moment, you're not going to be aware of anything anyway. You're going to be barely aware of your surroundings. And so I want us to be really mindful of where we are. I want us to be very mindful of the opportunities that we have. And this is hard because many of you have stress and issues and responsibilities and relationship issues and other things that are compounding that you're thinking about during the day, and you're not able to completely focus about what's happening in the moment. And so that's what I want us to think about is that how often are we off balance? How often are we in our heads, and being in our heads take us off target from where we need to be at? And so one of the things that I do to put this in practical sense is I catch myself. I try to dial into myself every few minutes just to check how I feel. I try to dial into myself. How am I feeling? Like if I'm in a meeting, how am I feeling? If I walk into a store, how am I feeling? Am I on the phone? So recently I try to get off the phone as much as I can. I don't want to be on the phone 24/7 when I'm doing things, especially when I'm running around or doing errands or doing what I need to do. I try to be focused. The other thing is, am I in my head? How much am I in my head? And that's something that gets a lot of us. I've had clients recently complaining, especially during the holiday season, about, falling and tripping, because they weren't paying attention, having a fender bender because they weren't paying attention, because they had all this going on in their head, all the stress that was happening. They couldn't deal with it. And so how much are you processing in your mind when you're out and about or doing something? How much of that are you doing when you're meeting with friends? How much are you doing that when you're in meetings? How much are you in your mind when you're talking to family members or friends? And these are the things we really need to think about, because these are the things that can really change our lives in a way that can really give us some insight into things that we're doing in our life that is getting in the way of being in the right place at the right time, because we could be in the phenomenal place at the phenomenal time, but we're not in it. And so we have no idea of that. And so we keep missing opportunities. We keep missing things. We could be in a meeting and somebody could share something with you that you've been needing to hear for a long time, but you don't catch it because guess what? You weren't paying attention. You weren't listening. You were in your own way. And that's where I feel like a lot of us are, is we get in our own way. We get in our own way of happiness. We get in our own way and we end up self-sabotaging ourselves. And self-sabotage is one of the toughest things, because remember, self-sabotage comes from our brain. Okay. It comes from our core beliefs of who we think we are. Okay, so if we don't think that we're good enough, or we don't think that we're valuable, or we don't think that we're this, or we don't think that we're that, that's what we keep thinking, right? That's what we keep thinking in our head. That's what we keep believing. And in the process of believing that, we get further and further off target from who we are. And it's interesting because our core beliefs can be very good. Our core beliefs can be, very positive and healthy. Our core beliefs can be very unhealthy and toxic. And so we really need to kind of tune into that. And that might be something that you want to do this year, is tuning in to these core values of what are the things that I'm thinking? What are the things that I think? What are the things that are actually disturbing me? What are the things that are getting in the way of my progress? And one of the biggest ways that we can figure this out is, quite honestly, how are we treating ourselves? And how are we letting others treat us? And I feel that when we start getting down to the self-sabotage, the real self-sabotage, it's not the huge stuff. Okay, so self-sabotage can come in a big package, right? Self-sabotage can be full-on drug addiction, drug use. It could be full-on alcoholism. It can be full-on, out-of-control gambling. It could be all of that at once. But most of the time, once we've worked on that large self-sabotage, the big stuff, the big ticket items, the smaller things are the things that get in our way, like the overeating a little bit, the not taking care of ourselves or going to sleep when we need, not working out and going to work out. I don't have time. I can't do it. I don't have time. Those things. And even though some people would say that are watching this or saying, I work out every day, the idea of not working out is asinine. That is a total self-sabotage. I get it. I understand that. But remember, there's different levels of self-sabotage. We could actually think things that are happening that aren't really happening. We could actually make choices based on what we think. I worked with somebody for a long time, and I still do. And we work with the radio stuff together. And it was interesting because at one point in time, he was going to apply for a position, but he's like, I'm not going to get it because guess what? I didn't get the two other ones that I applied to. So why do I even bother? And I remember after they closed the interview process and they were going to hire somebody, they looked at him and were like, why did you not apply? We wanted to hire you, but we had to put this person in the job because nobody else applied. We had to do it. But see, he basically talked himself out of it. And I'm not saying it's always that easy, but sometimes it is. Sometimes we have to look at things from that perspective and say, okay, am I actually talking myself out of something that I had the potential of doing because I'm looking at past situations? And the past is just that. The past is just that. The past is for us to learn from, but not to limit ourselves from. Learn, not limit. Right? So we can learn from things, but we don't have to own it. Our past, we don't have to sit there and be like, we are our past, because our past, a lot of us have gone through some real painful processes in the past. And we've learned from it and we've grown from it. But we have to accept that reality, see it for what it is, and learn from it and move forward. And so everybody that's had a tough past, kudos that you've gotten through it, that you're here to tell the tale, that you've lived to tell the tale. That's amazing. That's appreciative. I'm happy for you. I'm giving you a pat on the back right now. But what I am saying as well is that you do not have to own that past. You do not have to be that past. You can see it, you can be it, you can understand it, you can learn from it, you can grow from it, and then we begin to let that go. We don't want to forget it, but we want to learn from it and move forward. Earlier in the feed, let's see, it was on Instagram, because I know that we're here on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, because I don't want to confuse people, because if you're watching the video, you're like, I didn't see that, but it was brought up, and a very kind person and a smart, intelligent person brought up the fact that kindness is very important for them, and they're learning about kindness. And that's something I want to kind of segue in right now, is the kindness piece, right? So kindness does go very far. And I'm not talking about fakery. We're not talking about fakery at all. Fakery is not what I'm talking about. Fakery to me is just the opposite of kindness. So if we got to fake it, it is what it is. But kindness, being kind to people and understanding that as kind as I am to somebody, I also am being kind to myself. And I kind of mentioned it earlier before, is that the way that we treat other people directly impacts how we are treated and how we treat ourselves. And so one of the things is that I always laughed when I was a kid, and I remember the first time that when I was in the car and a parent, gets cut off, and the next thing you know, they're yelling and screaming out the window and yelling profanities, and the finger goes up and all this stuff goes on. And it was interesting. I was watching it and I realized that the first person to put the finger up, the funny thing about that is they're usually the first ones to see it. And not only do they see it, they actually have to go through the actual physicality of doing it, which is kind of funny. And, the first person to use the F-bomb when they say, and I'm not saying I don't cuss, for God's sakes, we all do, I think, to some degree, and I do to some degree, but, the first one to put out that F-bomb is the first one that hears it. And so the more kinder we are, we begin to hear the kindness in our own voice. We begin to hear the kindness in our own projection. Now that kindness, but it's not about us, right? I'm just saying there is a byproduct of being kind. There's a byproduct of it, but I wouldn't be kind just because of the byproduct. But there's a byproduct. So if it's like, what's in it for me? Well, that's what's in it for you. Okay. So what's in it for you is being happier, feeling better, just feeling less argumentative and angry. I mean, that's something that's very, very important, is like not being, being able to see that, being able to reflect on that, being able to have that feeling, being able to feel that, being able to convey that. And then as we convey to other people, the greatest thing about it is that we're actually reminding ourselves of who we truly are. Because at the core of all of us, there's a good person there. At the core of all of us, we have this thing that really radiates. And some of us, we know some people that maybe they don't necessarily show that at this time. And that can be challenging. But we also realize that with kindness, we need to be kind to ourselves as well. And so sometimes that means that being kind to ourselves doesn't mean always sticking around to hearing somebody say negative things, to hearing somebody, say profanities or whatever. It's time to move on with that. And so let's be kind to ourselves and start understanding, do we need to be cleaning house? Are there some situations and people in our life that we need to? Are there some people that you haven't been so kind to? Are there some people in your life as well, take it a step further, that actually maybe could be closer to you than you actually understand, and they actually could be a better friend to you than you actually realize? And so I know that this takes a lot, because many of us have been hurt, you've been taken advantage of, things have happened. But when we lead from that foot of thinking the negative, and I'm not saying this is like, oh, we're all going to be talking about rainbows and unicorns and everything's positive and amazing. I'm not toxic positivity here. That's not at all what this is ever about. But if we lead from the perspective of somebody always hurting us or we can't trust, usually that precipitates other interactions of the same quality. And so we have to be aware if we are kind of running on that thought process. But we need to be aware of our past, like I said before, but we also don't need to be living in the past. And so that's a big thing. So kindness, so being kind to people, reaching out to people, saying hi. I'm one of those people. I talk to a lot of people. I talk to people. I know everybody at the grocery store. I know everybody at the restaurant. I know everybody that lives in my building. I mean, seriously. And why? Because I care. Because I like to. Because I care. I genuinely care about people. But the kindness goes far. And so even if you're not a people person or really an amazing, insane extrovert, I'm not saying you don't have to be this amazing out there extrovert. You don't have to. It's not about that. It's about just putting it out there and saying hi, or being compassionate in your own right. And it's finding your own, I guess, place where that applies to you. I don't want everybody to be a cookie cutter. I don't want everybody to be the same. That's not what we're talking about. But what we want to do is be able to see, how do I interact and be kind with people in the way that makes me feel comfortable? And that's me. What does that look like? How does that look like to you? Because it's different for everybody. It's different for everybody. Everybody it's different for. And so I mean, I think that's really, really important to understand that. What does kindness look like to me? And what does kindness mean to me? What does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to be kind to people? What does that look like? What does it look like to me? What do I feel like kindness looks like? Because that's one of the biggest ways that I think that we can understand things is that when somebody does something to us, how do we feel that? How do we feel that? How do we feel that? How does kindness feel to us? How do we feel about when somebody treats us a certain way? Is that kind? Is that sweet? Is that loving? What does that look like? How does that feel? So it's like analyzing your own feelings and understanding how that impacts us and then how that impacts your actions, attitudes, direction, perspective. And I think that that's very helpful to think about. And so kindness is a big thing. So let's look at that. Let's raise the bar on that. Let's raise the bar on kindness and acceptance, but also within parameters. I mean, we also need to have boundaries too, because boundaries are important for our own kindness to ourselves. Because I think sometimes we don't want to confuse kindness with being walked over. That's something we don't want to confuse it with. Kindness is being caring, appreciative, authentic. That's what kindness is. And if you're being kind and someone else is not being kind, that can be very challenging too. But what I've realized too is that person at that moment, whatever they're going through is an issue, or maybe they're not evolved at that level at that time. But I've also realized that, sometimes, first impressions, you can't judge anything by that. But if somebody is consistently unkind and consistently disrespectful, that's something that we have to look at. And I think that, because a lot of people are going through a lot of problems right now. It doesn't make it right when people go off the handle. It doesn't make it right. However, people are going through a lot of things, a lot of stress right now. And so we want to take that in accountability, AKA kindness. Okay, I'm going to be, even if somebody wasn't kind to me, I'm going to be kind back, because it's not about that. It's not a competition factor. And it can be hard though. It can be hard when somebody's really, really rude. It can be very hard to be kind. And that's when it's the hardest, right? That's when it's the hardest to be kind. It's like, this person's a jackass. I don't want to do that. But at the same point, it's hard to do that, but it's the right thing to do. And why it's the right thing to do is because we're the ones that hear it. And it can be really hard, because if you're stressed and your stress level's up to here, it can be really hard to keep your cool and to keep your kindness. But remember, these things too shall pass, and you might be the person that they look up to or that they think about when they make change, or they realize some things in their life that they would like to change as well. So remember, we're kind of pushing that forward. The next thing that I want to talk about, and I know, God, I just talk. It's like I feel like I'm just talking. I wish there was other people in here that could just talk for me. But, I feel like we have to talk about this because it's time is of the essence. So another thing is when people feel valued, right? So when people feel valued, what does that look like? What does it look like? What does it look like to you when you feel valued? How does that feel to you when somebody values you? To me, valuing is being there. Valuing is showing that you care. Valuing is accepting things that we don't always understand sometimes. When I value somebody, I'm not questioning them all the time. When I'm valuing somebody, I'm accepting them as an individual. And I know that eventually there's times where I will learn more about the situation, but over time I will understand. I do know that when I am valued, it's a feeling where somebody is not judging you on a moment in time. I feel like our society, because of the way that things are so fast, it's what did you do for me yesterday? What did you do for me an hour ago? Or what didn't you do for me? And I feel like a lot of people are judged on that. And I feel like we judge a lot of people based on that. And I just think that that's wrong. Because that to me is a problem, because all of a sudden it's not about who I am as the individual. It's not about what I've always brought to the table completely, but it's about everything. It's not about that one moment. That's what's so important. And that's what it means to me when I feel valued. And so I want you to think about it. Who in your life do you want to show that you value? Because it's hard because we got to remember to show it. We got to remember to show it. And it's hard sometimes because we might get out of practice. Sometimes, these people are around all the time. And so what do we just, well, we don't think about it. It's like, if you're at home and you don't think about, each time your husband, wife, significant other, soulmate comes home, you don't say, oh my God, it's so good to see you. Oh my God. You don't do that probably. And I'm not asking you to do that, but is there times that we need to show that we value that person? Are there times that we need to say something? Are there things that we're not saying and we're assuming that they know? That's the key. Assuming that they know. And I think assuming anything is not a good idea. Anytime I assume, that's why I ask a lot of questions in sessions, is that I can't assume. If I assume, I'm going to assume wrong. And maybe I won't, because I do have I'm pretty good at kind of reading into things. But why would I want to make that assumption and assume wrong? And so that's one of the things that I really want us to look at is when we're valuing somebody in our life, what are some of the things we're taking for granted? What are some of the things that we should probably say from the get-go? Hey, I care about you, whatever it is that we are not saying. And, and what are the things that we're not doing? And what are things that we can do and step up to the plate to do? But also, what about valuing ourselves? What about valuing ourselves? How do we begin to show ourselves value? Because we can show people value all day, but if we don't value ourselves, what do we have? If we don't value ourselves, nobody's going to come in and value us. So how do we show ourselves value? Are there some things that you're doing that is disconnected from your value? Are you taking advantage of yourself? Some of us are. Some of us are doing everything for other people, and then you're not taking care of yourself. So literally, it's like, it's like what is it? The analogy that the housekeeper that cleans everybody else's house, but their house is a disaster. It's true. If you're cleaning up everybody else's stuff and helping them, that's okay. We got to put that in moderation. And that's good to help other people if they're asking for help. We can't just get in the way of it because that goes against a lot of things because somebody has to ask you for help to give them help. But where are we not helping ourselves? A lot of my clients are psychiatrists and psychologists, and we sit there and we talk about certain things. We talk about there's lots of different things, alcohol, drugs, whatever. And, and sometimes they come home and they're smoking this weed or they're drinking this and it gets to the point where it's excessive. When are we going to sit there and look at it and say, okay, it's time to go. It's time to go to the gym. It's time to take care of this. It's time to take a walk. It's time to walk the dog. How do we begin to do these things for us to show ourselves value instead of not dealing with our emotions and not dealing with the impact that things have on us? And so I want you to think about this. It's a lot easier to look at others than ourselves. And Todd, thank you so much for becoming a new member. I appreciate you. And you're right. If we don't value ourselves, we can't possibly communicate and value other people and communicate the value of others. And that's something that we definitely, and I think that's great. Todd, thanks for reaching out about that. That's very smart. And faint signals from Vega. Yes, exactly. Never assume because it makes an ass out of you and I. That's so true. So these are things that we have to think about is like, how do I do what's right by myself? And then how do I do what's right by others? How do I show myself value? And that can be small acts of kindness to yourself. It could be following through with some of these goals that we want to achieve, and sometimes those goals that we want to achieve, there might be some things we have to put on the back burner. There might be some things that you have to let go of or some things that you need to change in order to make those things reality. There might be some people in your life that you love that you just can't spend as much time with because they're taking so much of your time. You might have to back up some of that time a little bit and start taking that time and using it for things that you want to use it for. Because in the end, nobody's going to give you a Medal of Honor for not doing it. See, that's the problem. And this is the caveat here. And I know that you've heard this probably. If you're a giver and an empathic and you're out there helping other people, there's been a time when you've just lost it. There's been a time that you become resentful and you say, I've been doing all this stuff and I never got this done. And that person looks at you and says, it's not my fault you didn't do it. It's not my fault that you didn't go do that. See, and it's like, well, wait, and you start thinking about they're like, well, I was here at your house doing this, and I was doing that, and you know, and it's not their fault. It was our choice, but yet it was our choice, but yet we still did it, and we didn't do what we needed to do. And nobody's over there giving us a medal of honor. Well, you didn't do anything you wanted to do in your life. You did everything for everybody else. It's okay. It's not going to work that way. And that's just going to make us feel resentment and anger. And also, it makes us loathe helping other people, because when we are helping other people, we need to do it because we want to do it, not because we're being codependent, not because we think we have to or they're going to leave us. That's not why we do what we do. And that's a big check-in. That's a big check-in for this year, is that if you're doing things because you're just fearful of other people leaving you, or you're fearful of being alone, we got to think about that. Okay, because that's coming from not a good place. That's coming from an unhealthy place that we need to be aware of. That's coming from an unhealthy place that we need to examine. And as a recovering codependent, I understand it. I get it. But we need to look at that and say, okay, am I doing this because this is what I want to do, or because I feel like I have to do it? Now, what about me? Am I doing this? Am I not doing this for me because I don't feel like I'm worthy, or I feel like their stuff is way more important than my stuff? And then at what point in time is my stuff going to ever get important enough to get it done? And these are things that we have to think about. And some of these things are tough. Some of these things are not easy. It's not like this is the easiest conversation you're going to have. I mean, this is a pretty tough conversation that we're having right now. This is a conversation that many of you are having on your own. You know, you're writing things down. You're thinking about this. You're analyzing this, whether you're in the car or you're watching on YouTube or you're at the gym, or you're sitting there thinking about this. These are some real thoughtful things to be thinking about. And that's why I thought that this timing is of the essence. But this is a show that you could listen to every day of the year, and the timing is of the essence. I mean, we can talk a little bit about how I feel about timing, but I don't agree with all this stuff. You know, I agree that a day is a day is a day, but it's good to know that we just started this new year. That's good. But let's go with the same momentum, even when it's in April, even when it's in September. And that's hard. And that's why I said, let's not look at the beginning of the year and say, this is it. Let's look at it and say, okay, hey, I got this day. And I want us to look at each day with these same eyes, each day thinking about this. So each day I'm going to really think about my goal setting. I'm going to make it easier for myself. I'm going to decide if I'm going to do the harder things first because that's my direction, or I'm going to do the easier things first to give me a push in the right direction, right? I'm going to be mindful in the moment because I realize that I can be in that moment, but I might not even realize it because I'm not aware, because I'm not being mindful, because I'm not being present. I'm not focusing on even living. I'm too busy being on the phone or being in my head about the negative things that happened that day, or the call, or somebody not responding back to me, or the negative text message that I got that really upset me, or the comment. You know, I mean, something like that holds you back and keeps you out of that moment. Those are the things that we need to do. Those are the things that we need to focus on. You know, thinking about being that mindfulness, thinking about the kindness and how far kindness goes and how we can push it forward. Like the other day, it was interesting. I was looking at, I don't remember, it was like Facebook or something. And somebody was talking about something that they were looking at, like a goal that they had. And they said, you know, hey, if somebody could repost this. And for one moment, I was like, oh, I'm too busy. And I'm not too busy. I mean, yeah, I'm busy. I'm really busy. But I was like, screw it. Let me repost this and like they're putting something out there that's good and positive. Let me repost this. Let me do what's right. Let me take care of this. And I know it's like, I thought about it too. And I said, you know, if we all did those little things, I think the world would be a different place. But it's hard sometimes because we think I don't have the time. And I want you to think about, what are some of the things in your life that you say you don't have the time to do? And how many of those things that you don't have the time to do, how many of those things are really good for you and would be really good for you, but you don't have the time? And I want you to think about don't have the time, because I know a lot of people that say that, but I could call them at any given night at 8 o'clock when I'm leaving work. And I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm watching TV. You don't have the time. And that's what I want us to think about, is where are we putting our time? Because that's more like it. Where are we putting our time? We're watching somebody else live their life as a movie star on TV. We're watching this or that. You know what I'm saying? Those are the things we want to think about. Is how do we use our time to the best of our ability? How do we do that? You know, getting out there and just taking a walk. And what does it matter? It's about doing something that's really good for us. Doing something that's really good for us, and doing something that's good for us to actually do. I think we want to save that but I think maybe we do another one. We lost our time on TikTok, so we have to go back probably at some point and add another one. But if you're on TikTok, we apologize for that. We'll be right back on. But the thing is that we want to be forward with the kindness. We want to be forward with being valued. We want to see our value. We want to accept that value. We want to see other people's value. And the only way we see other people's value is seeing our own. And there'll be some people that once you see your own value, you're like, what am I doing in this relationship? There'll be some people that you'll say, wow, why wasn't I in this relationship earlier? So those are the things that you want to think about. The last few things that I want to talk about, because I know we don't have a ton of time left, is this is like a small thing that you can do today. You can do this tonight. I want you to write down 3 good things that happen to you every day in a journal. Just 3 good things. 3 things that you look back at the day and you go, well, that wasn't bad. That happened. Or I got to meet this person, or I did this or that. Just 3 things. I've seen people talk about 10 things. Not 10 things. Just 3 things. 3 things. That's all you want. And write it down. And put it in a notebook. I used to suggest putting it in a jar, but then you have all these little small pieces of paper. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So why don't we do it almost like in your calendar? And the way I do it is I actually write it in my physical calendar. So the calendar that I have that's this thick, that covers every single day of the year, I just write it down in there. The 3 good things that happened that day. 3 positive things or 3 changing things. I mean, it might not be always the most easiest things or the best things, but it's something that actually pushed your life forward on that day. So I want you to think about that. The 3 good things or 3 things that happened to you in a day, writing that in your journal every day, because it also makes you mindful of the day and it makes you think about that day. And that day doesn't just become another day lost. Because sometimes we don't even remember what we did yesterday. And sometimes we don't even remember what we ate that day. And that's so far from being mindful. And that's what I want us to think about. The next thing that I want to talk about is being better than you were yesterday, because many of us try to figure out how to be better, how to do better, how to do all this stuff. And that's great. And I'm so proud of you for doing all that you're doing. But a lot of times we focus on what other people are doing and how that impacts us, or what other people are doing and what we haven't done. And so I want you to think about that. It's not about what other people are doing and what you haven't done. It's about how do we get better than we were yesterday. So let's try to work on not comparing ourselves to other people on social media. Let's try to not work on comparing ourselves to other people's titles, because it can be really, really discouraging, because we're comparing ourselves to an image, an actual image. And what does that mean, to compare yourself to an image? You're not really comparing yourself to anything. You're comparing yourself to what you think that person is. And that's hard, because when we compare ourselves to an image, we're not really comparing ourselves to anything at all. All we're doing is hurting ourselves and upsetting ourselves and making ourselves feel really, really bad and really down, because we're like, look at that person on Instagram and what they look like. And they look so great. And they have this great work ethic. You don't know this. I don't know this. And I've caught myself years ago where I would be on Instagram looking, oh, they must have the perfect life. That's not even the case. And we find ourselves comparing ourselves to other people's pictures, comparing ourselves to other people's stories about what they're doing. And so this show is not about what we're doing or what I'm doing. This show is about what we can do on our own and in our own life to better our life. That's real information that can be taken and done something with and used. And so think about that. How can I be better than I was yesterday? What is one thing I can do, that I can do better than I did yesterday? Maybe it's like beginning to, limit the amount of judgment I have in judging my life in a negative way. And I think that many of you do that. You judge yourself negatively, and you might not even mean to, but it comes so second nature. And that's something that I want us to look at. It's something I want us to stop and get a grip on. Maybe it's like learning something. Maybe it's like, just being there, being more of, a better father, a better mother, a better person to ourselves, being more conscientious about our feelings. I've realized too, is that, we all get sick, but some of the times when we get sick, sometimes we can't prevent it, but sometimes we can, because we're just not taking care of ourselves. And that's something that I want us to think about, is there's sometimes in life that we could actually do more for ourselves, do more for other people. But definitely being better than we were yesterday, not looking at what other people have or do, because that's so hard, because that's how our world revolves. It's about the Joneses, right? It's about having more, doing more, but trying to get out of that mindset trying really hard because it's so hard, because our world is made that, because, people, they want people buying a better car. They want people buying a bigger house. That's the way that the economy is set, right? Which is so hard. And most people are their hardest judges, judge, jury, and execution. And Todd, that's a great comment. Social media shows everyone's highlight reel. And I think that's the key. While we see the B-rolls of our lives, that's really great statement. And the B-roll is the is the little footage that you take, and you add to it. And but that's the thing, is that we're looking at someone's highlight reel, and then we're judging ourselves. And also another comment: nobody else is harder on me than myself, and that's true. Nobody else is harder than most of us on ourselves. And so it's time for us to get a grip, because no matter, the harder we are, the more pain that we put on ourselves, the worse we feel about ourselves, the less our motivation is. The more we beat ourselves down, the less we do. And so that's what I really want you to think about, is that I'm going to be better than I was yesterday. I'm not going to try to be like that person. And it's going to be hard, because you're going to catch yourself many times where somebody's talking about something they did, or something that they had, or a job that they have, or whatever they have. And you're going to be like, oh my God, I just, their lives, at that moment, as quick as you can become mindful and realize what you're doing, exit out of that. Exit out of that. Because that's what's not going to give you joy. That's going to take away from your joy and take away from your motivation. And that leads me right into the next thought, which is the 8th thought. And that is, where are your thoughts? Where are your thoughts? Because what are you thinking about? Because our thoughts create our reality. Our thoughts create all of our reality. The way that we think directly relates to how we feel about a situation, and what we're thinking directly relates on how we think about that other person, or how we think they're going to be, or how our life is going to be. And so I need you to really think about it. Where are my thoughts mostly? Where are my thoughts mainly? Are they mainly positive? Are they mainly negative? Are they mainly neutral? How are my thoughts about myself? And it's hard, because you got to start catching that, because many of us don't even realize that we are so mean to ourselves. What are the thoughts about the people around us? What are our thoughts about their actions? And this is an act of mindfulness. This is an actual physical act of mindfulness that we have to figure out, right? Because this is something that's really true. Because if I have these thoughts in my head, I can create that reality, even if that's not the full reality of what's happening. I can create that to look real in my head, because I'm thinking it. It is real. That's what's so hard. That's why I said being mindful. You can be in the right place at the right time, but you don't even see it, because our mind is running game on us about what is happening, or it's taking us completely off target, or it's making us see a situation in a negative light that's not necessarily negative. However, it's painting it based on the past, or based on our fears. And that's one thing that I really want us to look at the very end right now, because I think that this is the biggest piece takeaway as well, is fear. How much is fear running your life right now? How much is fear in the way? And how many things are you doing right now based on fear? And I know there's people out there that have made lots of decisions in their life recently that are all based on fear. And that can get us into a corner. And so if you have a lot of fears that are going through your head right now, it's normal. That's human. But I need you to start writing those down. What are the fears? What is the fear coming from? What do you most fear? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are in relationships that they don't need to be in. But they're in them because why? Because there's fear of being alone. Many people stay in jobs, and I'm not saying to quit your job. I'm just saying, but many people are in jobs and they don't even go look for other things that they want to do in fear of not having that job. And I'm not saying quit before you find something. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying at least putting yourself out there and saying, Some of us are in fear of, just generalized fear. And so what fear is ruling your life? And let's look at those fears. Some of you might be in relationships that right now are just not, they're beyond toxic. And you're in it because of the fear. Some of you are in fear. Scared that somebody's going to betray you, scared that somebody's going to leave you. And that fear is what takes us off target, because that fear gets us out of that mindfulness and it gets us into this real emotionally negative, toxic place. And then we can get really triggered very quickly because things start looking certain ways. Because our mind's going a million miles an hour. Fear. This is going to happen. Paranoia starts stepping in. And so I want you to think about that, because those are very important things. And so writing that down, do I have fear? Where's the fear coming from? Am I fearful of this? Am I fearful of that? Where's that fear coming from? Some people are fearful of aging, and so they do all these different things. What's the fear coming from? Why? What's the base issue? What's the core belief issue that needs to be understood? That's the biggest thought. And last but not least, I want you to keep your promises. I want you to keep your promises to two people, to others and yourself. A lot of you keep your promises to other people, but some of you do not keep your promises to yourself at all. And this is something that needs to be the takeaway. What are the promises that you're not keeping for yourself? What are the past promises that you haven't kept for yourself? And what are some things that you can promise to do that you will do? And I'm not talking New Year's resolutions. You never heard me say it till just now. We're not going to use those words. What are some promises that we can make good? What are some promises we can make good on? And yes, we want to promise other people and do what we say we're going to do. But many of you, I like that. Amen. I like that. Many of us, though, are not stepping up and doing what we said we're going to do for ourselves. And each time we don't do it, we keep validating the fact that we're not good enough. We keep validating the fact that our promises aren't as important. We validate the fact that, well, we're not as important. We don't say that, but each time we don't do it, it's like literally, it's like taking care of everybody else and not taking care of yourself. Subconsciously, the body starts believing, subconsciously, it starts going in that you are not as valuable because you're not doing it. And it's just the way it is. So think about that. What promises? Let's keep promises this year. Let's keep promises to others. Let's keep promises to ourselves. And if things are getting in the way of allowing those promises, it's time for us to understand what is getting in the way. And if it's our own self and our own self-sabotage, why are we sabotaging? Because that's a lot of it. Because even if we're helping others, we can help others, and that's great, but there needs to be a time that we need to help ourselves. And we need to think about how that time looks and when we can actually create that reality. And that's what I want us to start thinking about. So really delve into your fear, keeping the promises with others and yourself, looking at where your thoughts are, like analyzing that and really taking a journal. A great comment here on YouTube, the concept of journaling, about how amazing how something as simple as keeping a journal improves overall well-being. It's a great coping mechanism. It's a great coping mechanism. Is also a great way of seeing our truth. It's also a great way of analyzing where we were at one moment. And it's also a great way of seeing how far we've come. Because sometimes we don't realize all the stuff we've done. Sometimes we don't even realize all the stuff that we've done and everything that we've created in our life. And that's what is so important. I hope that y'all have connected with, some of these thoughts today, tonight. I don't know, where you are in the world. Some of you, it might be morning, noon, or night. And I'm glad that you did tune in. And for everybody that tuned in, I would love to give you a wave on Instagram every time, but I think my finger would look kind of funny on the screen all the time, and I wouldn't be really paying attention as much as I wanted to. But I've seen many of you join in, and I've been wanting to say hi, and I'm glad to see you. And I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I'll try to wave back here while I'm here. And I appreciate y'all tuning in. And let me try to get some of those waves in. And I really appreciate y'all. and the comments that you've been making. On YouTube, I really appreciate the comments here as well. Very, very astute comments. And I love that, Todd. I promise to listen to you more this year. It's good for my mind and my heart. And I appreciate that. And I really appreciate all the comments and all the great comments today. And thank you for the happy New Year's and everything else. I really appreciate y'all telling me to have a good New Year's and a good year. And I want you to have that good year and that good New Year's. And so that from here on out, we're going to be doing a lot more live shows. We're going to be doing live shows. We're going to try to do once a week. I'm not going to always promise you that, but I'm going to try it as much as possible. So I really appreciate. Oh, thanks for tuning in also from Turkey. That's great. And I love you as well. And thank you for being a long time, subscriber. I do appreciate that. And for everybody that hasn't already, please, follow us on Instagram here, follow us on TikTok. For everybody that's been on TikTok, I really appreciate y'all on TikTok. And we're glad we're kind of more newbies on TikTok and we're enjoying being on the platform. And so for everybody that's tuned into TikTok, thank you so much for watching. And everybody on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in, because it really is, we're going to be doing a lot more live shows. But I really want you to think about that. It's time to make this year the best yet. Why not? What else are we going to do with it? So we might as well make it the best. And by making the best, we're being the best version of ourselves. And we're here for one another. And I appreciate that. Great show. You weren't a much bigger audience in 2023. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. And I hope so. And Faint Signals from Vegas, I appreciate you too as well. I would like to see 100,000 subs here as well. I appreciate that. So let's figure out how we can all help each other. And so really, honestly, just connecting with that, being the kindest we can, being mindful in the moment. And the more mindful we are, we also start realizing how we're all connected and why we're all here. And that's what's so powerful. So thank you so much for watching. We have more content coming out. We have short videos on YouTube coming out every single day. The shorts, the YouTube shorts. So please check those out. We'll have a full video on Saturday on YouTube. We'll be posting on Instagram every day as usual. Always every day on Instagram, and on TikTok. We usually post maybe during the week, but definitely always on the weekends, Fridays and Saturdays. So definitely check it out, and share with your family and friends. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I want y'all to have a great day today and tomorrow. Let's think about it. It's a great day. It's a new day. It's a new day. It's a new year. It's a new you. It's a new perspective. Let's rock and roll and do what we need to do to make it our best yet. Okay. Much love to y'all. Have a great night. Take care. And don't forget to live your true life.